The Galactic Council had made their assessment of humanity decades ago. Weak, soft, barely worth the fuel costs of monitoring. Their young matured slowly, required excessive care, and formed emotional attachments that the Council's xenopsychologists deemed tactically disadvantageous. When the human colony ship Meridian's Hope requested permission to settle on the frontier world of Vastkar, the Council approved without debate. Let the fragile species try their luck on a planet where even the insects had armor plating. Saren had been 16 when the colony landed. Now, at 23, she served as the settlement's xenobiologist, documenting the bewildering array of life forms that called Vastkar home. The locals, a reptilian species called the Kresh, tolerated the human presence with barely concealed amusement. To them, humans were cubs, small, clawless, fangless things that somehow survived despite lacking any obvious predatory advantages. It was during a market survey in the Kresh trading post that Saren first encountered Roan. The young Kresh warrior stood barely 7 feet tall, small by his species standards, and his scales bore the pale green shade that marked him as barely into adulthood. He was examining a display of human agricultural tools with obvious fascination, running his clawed fingers over the smooth metal with surprising gentleness. They're designed for efficiency, not combat, Saren had explained, approaching with the careful neutrality she'd learned to adopt. Roan's head had snapped toward her, slitted eyes widening. You made these? Cubs made these? We call ourselves humans, she'd corrected gently. And yes, that conversation had sparked an unlikely friendship. Roan began visiting the human settlement regularly, his curiosity insatiable. He watched their engineers work, asked endless questions about their technology, and seemed genuinely baffled by their lack of natural weapons. The other Kresh mocked him for it. They called him gentle, a profound insult in their culture, a Tiu, warrior, who wasted time with prey animals instead of honing his combat skills. Roan bore the mockery with quiet dignity, but Saren noticed how his scales would darken with what she'd learned to recognize as shame. Why do you keep coming back? She asked him one evening as they sat near the settlement's perimeter. Your people think less of you for it. Roan was silent for a long moment, his claws tracing patterns in the dust. Cubs, humans, you see things we do not. You make tools that think for you. You solve problems without bloodshed. My people call me gentle, like it is weakness. He looked at her then, and something fierce burned in those alien eyes. But I wonder if they mistake gentleness for weakness because they have never needed to be strong enough to choose it. 3 months later, the Kresh War Master Drek arrived at the settlement with 6 warriors. They came during the harvest, when most of the colonists were in the fields. Saren had been alone in the lab, cataloging samples when they entered without announcement. The council was wrong about this world, Drek announced, his massive frame filling the doorway. His scales were deep crimson, marked with scars from countless battles. Vastkar has resources we require. Your colony will relocate. Saren stood slowly, her heart hammering. We have a settlement charter approved by the Galactic Council. You can't just... Cannot? Drek moved with shocking speed, his clawed hand gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. You are cubs, soft, weak. You will leave or we will make you leave. The pain made her gasp, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. We're not leaving our home. Drek's grip tightened, and Saren felt something in her arm grind dangerously. The other Kresh warriors moved closer, their intentions clear. This was how the strong operated, she realized with cold clarity. This was their answer to everything. The door exploded inward. Roan filled the entrance, and Saren barely recognized him. His scales had darkened to near black, and every muscle in his frame was coiled with lethal intent. But it was his eyes that made even Drek pause. They burned with something the War Master had clearly never seen in young Gentle before. Touch her again. Roan's voice was barely above a whisper, each word carved from stone and edged with razors. See what happens. Drek laughed, though uncertainty flickered across his features. Gentle defends the cubs? This is what you choose to fight for? I choose to fight for those who have the strength to be gentle, Roan replied, moving into the room with fluid grace. For those who build instead of destroy, for those who answered all my questions with patience when my own people called me weak for asking. He positioned himself between Seren and the warriors, his stance unmistakable. You want her? You go through me. All of you. The silence stretched taut. The other Kresh warriors glanced at each other uncertain. They had size and experience, but something in Roan's bearing gave them pause. This wasn't the young warrior they'd mocked. This was something new, something dangerous. Someone who had learned from humanity that the choice to be gentle required more strength than the choice to be brutal. Drek released Seren's arm, his expression calculating. One cub is not worth this. Then you understand nothing, Roan said softly. It is never about one. It is about drawing the line. It is about deciding what you stand for. He took one step forward, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. I stand with humanity. I stand with those who choose to be gentle until the moment they cannot be. And in that moment, War Master, they show you why they survived long enough to make it a choice. The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Drek snorted and turned toward the door. This is not finished. No, Roan agreed. But today it is. Leave. When the Kresh warriors had gone, Roan's scales gradually lightened, and he swayed slightly. Seren caught his arm, steadying him. Thank you, she whispered. Roan looked at her, and something like a smile crossed his alien features. They still call me gentle, he said. But now when they say it, they remember why gentleness requires strength. They remember that humans taught me this. He paused. They remember that I growled. News of the confrontation spread through both settlements. The Kresh Council reconsidered their assessment of the human colony, not because humans were warriors, but because they had somehow taught one of the Kresh to choose when to fight. And in the Galactic Council's records, a small notation was made beside humanity's entry. Reassessment required. Species demonstrates unexpected strategic influence through cultural transmission, rather than force projection. But in the human settlement, they told a simpler story about the warrior called Gentle, who showed them that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most dangerous warnings, and that the strength to choose peace is what makes the choice to fight truly terrifying.